the harder you work, the more you get punished, not just by the work itself, but by people asking you to do more. So like the primary care doctor who's always willing, how can I say no? The patient is in need. I'll add another patient to my schedule. That's the person who never sleeps. And rather than rewarding that person, we just keep giving them more work. This is a reason I think fee for service has a lot of merit. People think fee for service just incentivizes like overuse.
Welcome to How I Doctor, where we're bringing joy back to medicine. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Lisa Rosenbaum, Boston cardiologist and national correspondent for the New England Journal of Medicine. But I want to warn you, dear listener, that I am officially taking this episode hostage, and I will only release it if you agree to listen to Lisa's own podcast, not otherwise specified, from the New England Journal of Medicine first. Okay, now that you're back, you already know that Dr. Rosenbaum has spent the past year diving deep into a topic that needs as much attention as possible, primary care. And in about 30 minutes, I promise you'll be saying the same to yourself. She really gets it. What makes Lisa's voice so important is that she doesn't just report on medicine, she explores it with nuance and courage, asking questions most of us never stop to articulate. I'm excited for you to hear what Lisa thinks we can actually do to change primary care and to learn from her proposed solutions to the broader problems in medicine we talk about so regularly on this podcast. But before we get to Lisa, a quick word from our sponsors. Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our newest How I Doctor sponsor, Savaro. Savaro is a top telestroke and neurology company that was built to fix one of the most predictable failures in modern medicine, getting timely, consistent access to a neurologist when you actually need one. Their team of board-certified neurologists deliver rapid video response, clear decision-making support, and continuity from the first exam all the way through treatment planning and management. Hospitals working with Savaro see faster door-to-needle times, fewer transfers, and measurable improvements in patient outcomes. And because Savaro was built by physicians, the workflows actually match real-world medicine. If you need stronger, faster, and more predictable neurology coverage, visit Savaro.com to learn more. And now, let's get into today's episode. Dr. Lisa Rosenbaum, welcome to How I Doctor.
Graham, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for maybe the nicest introduction I've ever had.
Your season is so good this year. It's about primary care, and you barely mention AI. Like everything these days is so AI focused.
Well, I will say two things. You caught me at a moment. I literally just finished listening to a draft of an episode that talks a lot about AI.
Boom, there it is.
I apologize in advance. So like by the time you run this, that episode might have aired. So I apologize to you. But I think that part of the reason I don't talk a lot about AI is that I think that the crux of primary care is about relationships. And I really, really wanted to focus on that essence, I think, and also that a lot of where we are with primary care is about what came before as opposed to what is to come. Obviously, part of my task is to think about the future and what that looks like. But a lot of the cultural issues that we face have nothing to do with AI. They have to do with the history of medicine and the sociology of medicine. And so I think that's part of the AI evasion. I would say the third thing is that like I was really terrified of AI as a person who was supposed to cover it thoroughly because I felt like I was late to the game with AI. But then I started using open evidence and I thought it was incredible. But what really happened is I read Bob Walker's book, which is going to come out. Yeah.
We just had him on the podcast last week. I read his book as well. It's great.
It's great, right?
Yeah.
And so I think when I read the book, I was like, oh, this is not about technology at all. So I'm now kind of into AI.
You know, Lisa, I think maybe in your first episode, you said you didn't intend to devote an entire season to primary care because you thought it might be boring. What changed your mind?
I think that there's a massive disconnect between sort of the way the profession has like presented itself, particularly like on social media in the last decade in terms of like a quest for justice and then our priorities like within how we actually practice. And primary care felt like actually the place where a lot of justice can be achieved, but we weren't talking about that. And as I tried to dissect that a little bit, I was just really struck by like just how much untapped potential there is to really help our society with robust primary care. And so it felt like our professional values were sort of inextricable from the fate of primary care. And the funny thing is, I mean, I have to end the podcast season at some point. One of my friends actually, we were exchanging voice memos yesterday. She's a primary care doctor, and she was like, "You must be so tired of primary care." And I was like, "I'm not tired of primary care at all. Like, I could do this
Yeah.
forever." There's just so much about our culture, both external to medicine and within medicine, that converges in the primary care arena. And that is so interesting to me.
We being like physicians, and I guess the healthcare system overall as well, like we all depend on primary care. That's the thing that I feels unacknowledged by the healthcare system and other specialties. Even like specialties that I think of as like in their own silo, like pathology or like radiology, like they just do their own thing. Everybody still fundamentally relies on primary care. And I don't think that we acknowledge that or give that the like respect, monetary compensation, like all of that is like teetering on this little tiny edge of this specialty made up of incredible people who are really just like trying to keep it all together and help their patients.
Right. And the reasons for that are so fascinating to me. Like,
Yes.
I still cannot wrap my head around that. There's nothing to me that is intuitive about valuing the specialty that must know the most and upon whom we rely upon the most. And again, back to your question, like, why is it not boring? That is not a boring question. Like, to try to understand that is like really interesting, and it also raises really, I think, important questions about what's changeable in our world. I think there's a widespread sense of doom, and that sense of doom is related to a sense of futility, that we don't have control, that we don't have autonomy, that there's nothing that any one individual can change. And I don't believe that about primary care. And part of why I don't believe that is I think culture changes and values change. And that feels like an important piece of all this to me, too. Like, maybe we don't say it's the most important now. In fact, maybe we treat it like it's the least important. There's nothing intractable about that.
Yeah. I mean, you do such a good job in the podcast and the writing, like just kind of asking the question, Lisa, like, well, why is it this way? And you mentioned culture and values, you mentioned money and status and power. Is there one you personally keep coming back to as like, yeah, God, if we just addressed that fundamental piece of it, like primary care would be better, or would be more fixed or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people think it all flows from money. I think money is secondary to respect. And that is what I would, if I could change one aspect of the culture. Like, again, it's not like this necessarily internationally. Like, we are unique in how much we have under prioritized and undervalued primary care. I do think that if we collectively were like, oh my God, this is like the most important work that is being done. And I'm hesitant to say, because like, I think cardiology is important, and I think
Sure.
emergency medicine is important. So
Yeah.
I don't know that it's a great idea to be saying one thing is more important than another, but clearly we haven't looked at primary care and recognized its value and importance. And so I think that's where I would start.
I think primary care, and I'll say this as an ER doctor, like wholeheartedly, I think primary care is one of the most challenging specialties.
I could never do it.
No, I mean,
So hard.
and I think the other, about respect, I think I see so many TikToks and people maybe complaining about their primary care doctor that they don't do anything or that they're referring. Like, I feel like if patients feel that way, it's because we've just like dumped this massive amount of responsibility onto primary care for medications and primary medical care of like kind of common medical problems and screening and prevention and quality metrics and like just I do not know how our incredible primary care workforce does it day in and day out. They are like incredible to me as an ER doctor saying that.
No, I totally agree. And I think, I guess another theme that is always interesting to me is this tension between the individual and the system. And I worry sometimes that we overblame the system at the it cost of not recognizing individual responsibility. And with primary care, I feel the opposite, that the system has truly failed primary care doctors and that we can't ask the individuals to do more. Like, I think that the moral injury there,
Oh, yeah.
insofar as the system keeps them from being able to do the job they want to do, is real. And so that, again, back to like, well, that's pretty interesting because the system also is fixable. Like, it doesn't have, there is nothing about the system in terms of the way it functions for primary care that has to be the way it is. We don't have to ask them to do 27 hours worth of work every day. Like, there are other people who could do a lot of that work. You don't have to have them do 15-minute visits. Inboxing is interesting because, like, I think the temptation is to be like, well, somebody else can manage their inbox messages. I don't think that that is what either doctors or patients want. That creates a lot of redundancies. And I feel like so much of what makes our healthcare system dysfunctional is that we add on things that just end up creating more inefficiencies. But I think we could decrease people's panel sizes and things like that so the inbox became manageable.
I actually think that patients are trying to help their doctor by just sending an email. They think it's faster or, oh, it's just a quick question. I don't want to bother them. But I think what the patients don't realize is that by and large, physicians, clinicians, I think whether you're primary care or otherwise, like are not getting time or payment to respond to those questions. And so that email digital work is kind of in addition to the appointments that they're seeing patients 8:30 to 5 or whatever it is. And I bet you a lot of physicians would actually rather have the patient make an appointment for what seems like a simple thing, because that would then like block off this time that they actually can then be present with the patient and actually answer their questions and go through anything else that's coming up, as opposed to hurriedly try to answer this question so they can get to the next email that they're all kind of doing for free.
Oh, totally. Because back in the day, we didn't have the patient gateway, and people would call the office and it would be an independent practice. And the person answering the phone would know them, and they would know that if this person's calling, then it's probably really bad. And then they would say, oh, Dr. So and so is going to see you during her lunch break, or she said she could stay a little bit longer. So why don't you pop in? And now they don't have any availability, but we could solve a lot of problems if we had room for people to actually see their own doctors.
On this week's episode, we're trying something new. I love lifting up other physician voices, so we've launched a new off-call series called Physician Spotlight. Our first guest is none other than Dr. John Dayton, an emergency physician practicing in Utah, investor, and advisor. We asked John what AI tools have made the most impact on his practice, his thoughts on the recent AI prescribing news out of his home state, and much more. Take a listen.
AI just prescribed medications autonomously in Utah. Should doctors be scared or embrace this? I have a hot take on this one. Many have focused on physicians being replaced by this technology. However, after I did a deep dive with Dr. Byron Crow from Doctronic, I have a different take. Rather than replacing physicians, Doctronic has set up an augmented workflow for medical refills, which is a time-intensive but low cognitive load process. Rather than replacing physicians, Doctronic has built a physician-led process based on best practices with physician-driven escalation and checks. They're actually setting a standard for how physicians should lead and oversee digital health and AI solutions. I'm a big fan of clinical decision support tools like OpenEvidence, Vera, Doximity's DocsGPT, and UpToDate's Expert AI. Even though clinical decision support tools are sexy, as a healthcare investor and startup advisor, I'm particularly interested in how AI can improve efficiency with improved clinical scheduling, how we improve workflow, and with patient summaries for transition of care.
Thanks, John. To read John's entire interview, head over to offcall.com/learn. And if you want to be featured in our next Physician Spotlight, get in touch at podcast@offcall.com. And now, back to the show after a short word from our sponsors. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Savaro. If you've ever waited and waited for a neurologist to call you back, you know the problem that Savaro was built to fix. Savaro is a physician-led telestroke and neurology company that delivers rapid virtual neurology coverage that's reliable. Their board-certified neurologists connect by video in under 45 seconds, and they stay with you through the entire decision-making journey. Hospitals working with Savaro report faster door-to-needle times, fewer unnecessary transfers, and measurable improvements in patient outcomes. If your hospital needs stronger, faster, more consistent neurology coverage, visit Savaro.com to learn more. I think that gets a little bit to the trend that I'm seeing a bit more about physicians going back to independent practice, physicians wanting to have control over how their schedule works, how they allot their time, how they manage their patients, and that part of the moral injury is really the lack of control, the lack of autonomy. And I think there's a whole generation of us, probably like you and me and a little bit older and a little bit younger, that have no idea what that's like, that we never interacted with physicians in their own practice who kind of set their own rules and decided how things worked as well.
Totally agree. It's funny. I feel like it's the best kept secret of inpatient medicine that I actually, on any given day, have a lot of autonomy. Like nobody knows where I'm supposed to be. I know, no,
You
I
could be
really,
hiding in the
I
break room. Yeah, yeah.
could not show up. No, I'm kidding. But like, so you spend as much time as you need with the sickest person, and if there's somebody who's been waiting for a TAVR for 3 days, and I always worry when I do this that like I'm gonna miss something, so I don't even like to say it out loud and jinx it, but you can probably spend a little less time. And so it's funny because you asked me, kind of I'm repeating the question probably incorrectly, but you asked me if there's like one thing, like where do you start with primary care? And I said, well, respect. But I think it will air this week. We did an episode on concierge medicine and direct primary care. And in the whole intro, what I talk about is if I could give primary care like one thing, it would be a restoration of this autonomy and autonomy as a path to independent practice. So I think the loss of independent practice, particularly for primary care doctors, is one of the worst sort of more structural forces that we've seen. But I think also part of what I've learned in surveying this massive primary care landscape is just that communities have vastly different needs wherever you go. And one of the wonders of independent practice is you design your practice around what your patients need. And I think that's so cool. And it's crazy to me that we like try to have these like one size fits all policies for primary care and don't recognize like the untapped knowledge of people in local practices who are able to design their practices around a community for a community.
I think one of your first pieces in the journal, you wrote about concierge medicine. And I think you had like a person with like a really ugly, big pericardial effusion.
Oh
And that
yeah.
you were like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare getting this person follow up. And then you were just amazed and very pleasantly surprised that like the concierge PCP just kind of owned it.
That was a transformative moment for me. So until that point, I had been like, concierge medicine is for wealthy people who want benzos, essentially. That was like the running narrative in my head. And what happened is it was Saturday, so really hard, to schedule follow-up appointments. And I'm not a big believer in the whole like follow up with your cardiologist or PCP thing because we all know how that goes. And so I try to get things set up for people. And it was like a very young person with a big effusion, which to me screams malignancy until proven otherwise. So it was like triggering all the like I'm going to vomit feelings in my stomach. Like I can't set it up. It's a kid, like all these things. And then I get this call out of nowhere and I'm like, who is this? Like, why is this person paging me on Saturday morning? He knew more about what was going on than I did, which was like slightly embarrassing.
Yeah.
And he was just like all over it. And I was like, this is new and cool. And I want to understand this.
Lisa, why are two physicians working at very good health systems both agreeing that referrals are so challenging?
I don't know. I honestly, I would be just BSing you if I said I knew because I don't understand that. I know it's a problem, but why it's happening, one hope that I have for AI, if anything, is that maybe some of like the burden of like waiting for specialists, and you can access expertise more easily. Like maybe there will be some more slack in the system because of that, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like do we have a physician shortage? Is that real? Like I last time I
Right.
looked into this, it was like a controversial thing and I don't
Yep.
know. I know that it's harder in rural areas, although I have to say like my one of my most fun discoveries in writing about primary care was just like how badass rural primary care doctors are, and they do so much stuff because it is hard for their patients to access specialists. They're just like really amazing. They're like pulling teeth and
Yeah.
like doing vasectomies and like deliver. I mean, they do everything. It's like a really cool phenotype, I have to say.
Yeah.
Like if I were good at stuff like that and I wanted to live in a rural area, there are lots of if this and if that, it would be really fun.
I think one of the challenges, Lisa, that you talk about a little bit, I think in most of your episodes, or at least you kind of imply, is physicians being less interested in like owning the responsibility for their patient.
Right.
I don't know if that.
No, that is a thing. And I don't think that this is universally true. I mean, one of my favorite things, I mean, we give surgeons a hard time, but one thing that always stands out to me about surgeons, like once they've operated on someone or even before,
Right.
like they own it. And I've
That
thought,
is such a good point. That's so
yeah,
true. Yes.
and I've thought a lot about like the transformation in the sense of responsibility one feels, and only can have like this inner window into myself. So like even when they started putting epic pictures of people on, so like
Yep.
you get an admission, you see it pop up on your list, or well, you don't know because you're in the ED. You're admitting people to me, and but like when you get an admission, there's always this like oh more work. Like we all feel that way, right?
Sure.
But even
Human
even
nature. Yeah.
when they like put the picture up, like something inside of me melts. Like I feel like an instant like I wouldn't go so far as to say ownership yet, but the beginnings of affection. You know what I mean? For the human, that this is a person, not just
Yep.
like an admission. And it was always amazing to me as a trainee, that process of transformation. Like, this is my fifth admission this night. I don't want to do it. And then all of a sudden, like you're in there for an hour getting the story, and then you write the note, and then they're yours. Like you own it.
Yeah.
And so I've thought a lot about why there's been an erosion of that sense of responsibility.
I
And
feel that. Like, I feel that to my core that no one wants to be kind of holding the bag, holding whatever that sports analogy is. Like, I definitely feel like there is an erosion in, I guess the right word is ownership. That feels too paternalistic or something like that, but just like the ownership of the responsibility, that you are accountable, that you are the trusted expert, the professional. Maybe it's a professionalism thing. I don't know.
I only can draw from like what I feel inside when I'm doing clinical work, but like, I spent so much time on cardiology consult services. And the impulse to like block a consult is so, I mean, you must feel this in the ED all the time, right? You call the
Of
consultant,
course.
we do everything we can not to see the patient, which
I had an attending, Lisa, who called it consultant avoidant behavior.
it is. And I get it. Like I don't like I totally get it. Like it's only more there's no incentive, right? You don't get paid well I at a lot of places at academic medical centers you don't get paid more. You have
Yep.
more work. But then I think the thing that has to do with responsibility, I don't know what it feels like for you, but as soon as I like walk in a room and talk to a patient and their family, I feel like a totalizing sense of responsibility. And so I think when you're on the other side of that, that it would be nice to be like, yeah, just put on a little beta blocker and some anticoagulation for that AFib. Like, I don't need to get involved. Why can't you manage AFib? And then
Yeah.
you like go see the patient, you're like, oh, you have
Oh,
AFib because
they're a hot mess.
you have severe mitral regurgitation and nobody's ever thought about it or like whatever, you know what I mean? So like once you get involved, I feel personally like once I'm involved, I can't like it's not acceptable to like not go all in. And going all in means like you have to read the whole chart and like you always learn things. And I think that if we recognize that this locus of responsibility is super important, and I think it is, then we ought to find better ways, not just to bring it out on people, but to reward it. So I had one guest who said something like, the harder you work, the more you get punished, not just by the work itself, but by people asking you to do more. So, like, the primary care doctor who's always willing to just, all right, fine, I'll take, like, how can I say no? The patient is in need. I'll add another patient to my schedule. That's the person who never sleeps. And rather than rewarding that person, we just keep giving them more work. This is a reason I think fee for service has a lot of merit. People think fee for service just incentivizes like overuse. The flip side is that if you don't reward people for doing work, then we don't do it.
Fee for service having merit from Lisa Rosenbaum. That's spicy right there. I think everybody loves to dump on fee for service, myself included sometimes, you know?
Well, sure. I mean, I think any payment model is going to have trade-offs, and the secret sauce is to find the one with the fewest trade-offs. I don't think a system that takes away the reward for extra work is a good one for our healthcare system. And I also happen years ago I wrote like something called like the less is more crusade or something. It was during the time where basically we were all like the problems in healthcare, the reason we spend so much is because there's all this waste because doctors are just doing all this unnecessary stuff. And I've just never bought into that narrative because more than anything, because it assumes foresight. It assumes that you know in advance what is not going to help a person. And a lot of times we don't. And I think that any profession, doesn't matter the profession, is going to have bad apples. And I felt like that narrative was run on the engine of like physician bad apples that had been on the front page of the New York Times, and that we have a lot more good than we have bad.
I kind of feel like we just haven't all agreed on the rules of the game or how things are supposed to work. And so whether it's referrals or like, does the PCP order the tests that the specialist recommends or does the specialist order them? We just can't, we have not as a profession, culture, society agreed who owns that. And so both parties say, "Oh no, you got that. Go for it. Go ahead and order the test or follow, and own the follow-up of the test." In the same way, like do you want the PCP to try to manage the hypertension and the diabetes? Or should the PCP just be a referral bot? Like just, oh yeah, my job is to just be a gatekeeper and a referral engine for the more lucrative, quote unquote, specialties in my health system. We just haven't really agreed on even what the role of primary care should be in this country.
I think if we don't have like a massive intervention and like sea change away from the default, which is now heading toward referral bot, essentially like let's just replace primary care doctors with advanced practice practitioners and encourage referrals to more lucrative specialties in large health systems. And unless we can have whatever conversation, recognition, acknowledgement, whatever it is, where we collectively are like, no, that's not what we want primary care to be for our society, then I think that's where we're headed, which is really concerning. And I think
Yes.
you're getting at a deeper philosophical challenge that I think affects all of us, which is this question of where is the locus of responsibility? And traditionally, part of what we look to for primary care was to be the quarterback, to always be carrying that responsibility for the patient, including in the inpatient setting. And I think as primary care, if it does indeed like move into the rear view window of the profession, I think we're going to be seeing more and more of this passing the buck where nobody has an incentive to own it. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things that could happen to our healthcare system. And you hear it all the time from patients. They say, none of my doctors talk to each other. They come away from visits having no idea like what was said. And then they hear different things from us. And then we're like, why does nobody trust us? Well,
And I think one of the PCPs you spoke with on the episode a few weeks ago honestly kind of called out medicine, that the focus of medicine should be academics and research and knowledge discovery as opposed to patient care. And that is probably part of this as well. That even the large academic medical centers, they're emphasis is on being a really good physician hyphen researcher. It's not to be the best clinician possible. It's not to churn out the best primary care physicians or even the best cardiology clinicians. It's to focus on research. What do you know? We don't have as many physicians that are interested in being at the bedside or working in the office as we used to.
Right. That was Steve Martin, who's extraordinary.
Yes.
He is a primary care physician in rural Massachusetts. And this is partly like a problem and also a fixable problem. So if we in academia said, rather than only promoting people whose CV is 100 pages long with all the research that they've published in Science and Nature and New England Journal, but we actually wanted to promote the best clinicians, I think we would see a massive change in the generations that come. Because right now, I think what you see is that a lot of talented people in medicine are drawn to academia, and then they are encouraged to go into scientific careers and put their talent and time and energy there. And if we instead had them become outstanding clinicians, and back to this idea of rewarding people, not just rewarded them monetarily, but rewarded them with prestige, I think that you would see a very different looking profession.
I loved the episode with Dr. Martin. He honestly he called out prevention and quality metrics. Not that I think any physician would disagree that better blood pressure control and better A1Cs are overall better for a population, but that time required to do that takes away from the time required to help the person with maybe the reason they made the appointment in the first place. And I think that's honestly a fairly controversial thing to say. I don't disagree with it, but I think doctors have been kind of given this population health title that I don't know that we ever all really signed up for. I'm curious how you square those two thoughts in your head.
I agree with you. I think it's a controversial thing to say. I think it makes everyone squirm, including me, because how do you talk about it without thinking about the person who came in with a massive stroke because they had 30 years of
Yes.
uncontrolled blood pressure, right? You can't, my brain cannot do that.
Well,
At
they're
the
both laudable goals that I think you and I would probably both agree on.
Exactly.
Yes, we support both of these.
Right. So then the question becomes, can you recognize two things? One is finite resources. And by resources, I don't mean money, etc. I mean time and cognitive bandwidth, and also patient tolerance for having things put upon them. And then the other thing that I think just gets so overlooked are people's values. You're really saying to somebody the most important thing in your life is not to have a stroke. And in order to do that, you need to be on these 3 medications that I'm going to prescribe. And if you don't do that, then I think that you don't care about your health, you're non-compliant or whatever. And I think that is a paradigm that is not working for our, when we look at the dissolution of trust, I think a lot of it has to do, to get back to this question of population health, is these are the things that we say matter. And when you come in because you can't lift your arm because you have a rotator cuff tear or whatever, or you're actually really worried about your wife's dementia, and I'm saying, why aren't you taking your lisinopril? You fracture something right there. I think that when Steve starts talking about population health metrics, what he's really talking about is the tension between the individual person in front of you and the health of the population. And I tend to agree with Steve that I think we should be caring about the person in front of us. And if that means they too understand the risks of having uncontrolled hypertension and diabetes and hyperlipidemia, that's great, but maybe that's not their priority. Or maybe it's not worth being on a medication for their whole lives. And that's a really hard thing for physicians, I think, to swallow.
Lisa, we didn't get a chance to talk too much about money and finances. Your piece on the AMA's RUC committee that determines RVUs and everything like that. I didn't know this statistic, but 35% of visits are in primary care and less than 5% of resources. Is there a way to think through what the right amount of spending is? Do we look at other countries? Do we try to take away from specialists and give that back to primary care? Like, how have you thought through this big discrepancy in reimbursement?
Right. Well, I don't think taking away from specialists is a winning argument, and you can tell me that that's because I'm a cardiologist, and that's fine. But I don't. This idea that the budget has to be zero sum, that is a premise that I think deserves challenging, and nobody wants to hear doctors arguing that doctors should make more money. That is another argument that is not winning. But if you think about the future of the profession and why people either choose or don't choose to go into medicine, I think if we want to attract the best and the brightest, as we have historically, we have to make sure that physicians are still earning a lot relative to peers who go into tech or finance or
Sure.
law.
Yeah.
When you talk to primary care experts, they say that countries that have like a sustainable primary care workforce allocate about like 15 to 20% of
Hmm.
healthcare dollars toward primary care. So I think that's like a very reasonable goal. And I would not try to achieve that goal by taking money away from specialists. I don't think that all that will do is create internecine battles, that we don't like that's not what our profession needs. I would rather see us think about other areas of excess spending within our healthcare system and also recognize the potential. And by the way, this took me a long time to believe, but I now do, of robust primary care to decrease healthcare expenditures overall. So it's an upfront investment for a long-term gain. And that sounds like a little bit rah-rah, and I can't prove that, but I bet if we had primary care that could function in a more holistic way, we would see our health expenditures go down.
I completely agree with that. Like I said at the beginning, we all rely on primary care, every single specialty in medicine. And so I cannot imagine a world where funding primary care better and having more primary care doctors who are more fulfilled and doing better work doesn't lead to like massive savings on downstream. Lisa, I just have a few kind of lightning round questions for you at the end. Finish this sentence for me. Primary care will be saved when.
We respect primary care physicians.
Who's the we in that sentence?
Medicine and society.
Lisa, what after this year of learning about primary care and figuring out how to fix it for all of us, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that there are a lot of primary care doctors with their heads down doing the work, and maybe we don't hear from them enough, but they have found joy in practice by getting to be the doctors that their patients need. That gives me hope. The other thing that gives me hope is that I think our society is hurtling toward a crisis of like loneliness, isolation, and a fundamental erosion of like relationships at the centers of our lives. And I think that is going to come to a head, and it will shift the societal desire to have somebody in their life in the form of a doctor who's out there who can care about them across their lifetime. So I think the importance for society is going to go up.
Yeah. We are out of time. Dr. Lisa Rosenbaum, this was totally a dream come true.
Same.
Where can people find you and your work? What's the best place to send them to?
Oh, well, should I ask Claude Code to make me a website? I've been thinking about it.
Hell yeah, you should.
I've been really wanting to try that. I don't, so all of my work is at NEJM.org, except for like work I did before. And then you can listen to Not Otherwise Specified wherever you get your podcast. It feels so funny to say that. But yeah, it's on Spotify, Apple, at the New England Journal site.
Amazing. Highly, highly recommended. If you want to understand medicine, you have to listen to this podcast series. I will not have it any other way.
Thank you.
Lisa, it has been such a pleasure.
Such a pleasure for me. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today. For interviews with physicians creating meaningful change, check out offcall.com/podcast. You can find How I Doctor on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll have new episodes weekly. This has been and continues to be Dr. Graham Walker. Stay well, stay inspired, and practice with purpose.